welcome to our 9th of 10 webinars in our 2025 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one titled A Fireside Chat with Gail Miller, Making a Difference. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also, long title here, Karen Haight Huntsman, Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be interviewing Gail Miller today. Now, this event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents in 3 ways. 1, we produce relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. 2, creating and gathering valuable resources. And 3, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And as always, I want to thank our sponsors, which are the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University and also USU Extension. And I'd like to start by introducing Gail. And I've got a long bio. I took out a couple of sentences if it's as painful for you as me when I hear my bio read.
Not a lot.
But it is wonderful to read and remind people of these things. So I'll get introduced and then we'll turn over time for you to answer some questions. So Gail Miller is the co-founder and owner of the Larry H. Miller Company, established by Larry and Gail in May of 1979, with the purchase of their first automotive dealership in Murray, Utah. I was born there, Gail, Murray, Utah. Today, the company has a diversified portfolio of businesses and investments across the United States. Their headquarters is in Sandy, Utah. Now, after Larry's death in 2009, Gail took an active role in the business and continued to grow their legacy. She created and served as the chair of the Larry H. Miller Board of Directors for 5 years before turning that position over to her son, Steve. And she remains an active member of the board. The business oversees a portfolio of business platforms and companies spanning real estate. I wanted to make sure and get this in: real estate, healthcare, sports, most people know that one, and entertainment and other investments. And I love that Gail is the chair of the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation and presides over the Larry H. Miller Education Foundation. So just to conclude, Gail has been recognized by many public and private honors. And I just pulled out a couple. She's the recipient of 6 honorary doctorate degrees and of course, other wonderful recognitions. And I've been so impressed that Gail has given freely of her time and actively participated in many business, civic, and educational endeavors. For instance, she serves on the Zions Bank Advisory Board, the Shelter the Homeless Board, and is co-chair of the Kempsey Gardner Institute. And she's the author of the book, Courage to Be You, Inspiring Lessons from an Unexpected Journey. And Gail and her husband, Kim Wilson, have a combined family, 9 children, and a large posterity. That's a lot of big combined family. And do you have a count of grandchildren and great-grandchildren?
A rough count. There are about 45 grandchildren, 40 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
So a lot to keep track of.
I love it. I love it. That takes some work to keep track of, but exciting in so many ways. So again, thanks so much for joining. And although people, you're well known in Utah, I would like, and I've just read the bio, let's still start by having you share a few highlights of the path that really have led you to where you're at today.
Well, Susan, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of your programs. You do so much good, and I appreciate being able to hook on to your success and maybe make a difference somewhere. My early childhood, I was a war baby, so I grew up in pretty similar circumstances to everyone in our neighborhood. Everyone struggled, but we were all trying to do the best we could. Had a great childhood. Went to high school at West High School in Salt Lake. Took 1 quarter at the University of Utah. Then my father had a stroke, and I ended up withdrawing and supporting my younger brother and sister and my mom while she took care of him. Then I got married. We had 2 children, moved to Colorado. Larry got entrenched in the car business when his boss decided he was going to move that over to his own boys. We moved back to Utah, bought our own dealership. I was a stay-at-home mom, took
Mhm.
care of the children. I actually had children in my home for 44 years. So my main career was wife and mother.
Yeah.
I did not work after my initial job in high school until I came back into the company after Larry died. I didn't work in it
Wow.
while we were building it.
Can I just say you didn't work for pay? You worked all the time though
True,
for
Susan. Thank you for clarifying that. I actually did get rewarded well. So monetary is not the only way you can be paid, but I enjoyed being a wife and mother. And actually, those years prepared me for being able to step into the company and do a lot of the things that I needed to do. When Larry was very ill and thinking that he wouldn't live very much longer, he said, I think it's important that you stay involved in the company long enough so the kids can get their footing, and then whatever you want to do, you can step out or you can continue, but you need to be a bridge.
Mm,
Because all of our building years, I had been right by his side. So I knew about everything that was going on. He taught me about the business. I actually was a full partner legally and served as president of all of our organizations. So even though I didn't have a role as a job, I did have a role in the company. So when he passed away, my son, my oldest son, was the CEO. And I was used to getting a lot of information every day from Larry. But when he passed away, that spigot got turned off. So I
yeah.
said to my son, I need to know what's going on. I'm going to come into your meetings so I can hear what you're doing. And I did that for a while. And then he eventually stepped down, and that's when I took a more
Mm,
active role. And I could see things that I felt Larry would have done had he lived longer, but didn't have time to do.
mm,
One of those was create a board of directors. And the reason I could see how important that was is that I knew there had to be a bridge from the current business to the future, and a
mhm,
way for people to create a career path, including our family, so
mm.
that as a family run and owned business, they had a pathway to become leaders in the company. And so creating a board of directors took care of that.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And I thought, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to be the chair. So that was a pretty bold step for a woman who had never worked in the company. But
But
they,
you were prepared. It sounds like you were in these conversations all the time. You weren't just jumping in from nothing. You
that's
really
true.
knew what was happening, even though you didn't get a paycheck, right?
That's true. That's true. And in reality, I actually handled all of our own personal
Mm,
finances. So
yeah,
those came from the company. I knew, I had a lot of background knowledge.
yeah.
So it was scary, but it worked.
And
And
how many years ago was it that kind of took over and then I'm trying to think, it seemed like when 2009 is when Larry passed. So
Larry
it's
passed in
been 16
2000.
years.
Yeah, he passed in February of 2009. Greg stepped down in 2015.
Okay.
He was there for 7 years. Wow. And he did so much good in growing the company and building a foundation and reorganizing, that it wasn't, we were never broken. We had a career path and a business path that was solid, vibrant. I didn't have to do anything really hard except become part of the company, which as a woman was, I have to say, it was not easy, even in my own family, but it worked and we've come a long way, and we have a lot of women today that work in the business in high levels. So
Well, automotive is especially, I mean, you have various things. That's a very masculine company. I mean, that's just masculine environment. The way it's set up is more for men. So it is an interesting space. I know just from buying a few cars, right?
it is a masculine space, and but there are women that work in it, and we did
Yep.
have a woman general manager of our Toyota
Mm,
store who did a great job. So there is room for women in the automotive world, and more, it's becoming the norm
yeah.
because barriers are being broken down, and women are very capable.
Yeah. So you said it was a bit scary. So just that's a big step. And I see women who have done what you did, and that is stay at home with children and do and maybe they're coming back to college or maybe they're going back to the workforce. It's kind of a scary step, no matter what it is. But I found, Gail, and I don't know if this is your experience, that once they get into my class in college or whatever it might be, it doesn't take too long to get comfortable and find your voice in some ways. Same experience?
Yes, it was the same experience for me. In fact, in my book, I talk about finding my voice. I went through a period in my life where I felt very inadequate. It wasn't while I was working in the company, but it was while I was raising children because they had no interaction with a broader world. All of
Mm,
my conversations were with children, and I wasn't smart enough to keep up on current events and be
yeah,
aware of what was going on nationally like I do today, which is really important.
yeah,
So finding your voice is a hard thing to do, but it can be done. And I think the biggest obstacle is fear, fear of failure, fear of being an imposter, fear of not fitting in. And that's where courage comes in.
yeah,
I had to say to myself a lot, I can do this. I'm
yeah,
smart. I have common
yeah,
sense. I can see the landscape. I know that there are people who've done it before. Why shouldn't I be able to?
yeah.
And I think those are things we have to keep telling ourselves. I'm
That self-talk.
smart as the next person.
Yeah. And when you said a minute ago, you were not smart in those issues because you hadn't kept up. So
Right.
that for all of us, if we're not in, and we have to pick and choose. I mean, I have raised kids too, and you couldn't do anything. You have to pick and choose what are you going to keep up on. And typically, if you have the kids in the home, they take priority, don't they?
That's true.
I love that. Thank you so much. So with your various responsibilities, you've had to make some really big, impactful decisions. Maybe even with imperfect or incomplete information. You still have to move and make decisions. Did you lean on any specific guiding principle or underlying theme when you were making those big decisions, and how did that serve you?
Oh, I think that's a great question. And yes, I think each one of us has to look inward and decide what our own personal values are. And we have to live by those. If we are always changing those values and saying, well, maybe I don't believe that one anymore, I think we have to know who we are and what we believe in, and it's very important. Now, having said that, I did that personally, but I also did it with the company
Mm,
because after Larry passed away, the the turnover is normally, I don't know if there's a number you can put on it. I know in Christmas cards, it's about a quarter of a year that everybody moves, a quarter of the people you send to. It's probably similar in the employment world. So there were people coming in who never knew him. He knew
uh,
what the values were. He knew what he'd done to build that solid foundation. So we set about creating a program called Who We Are. And
mm,
that's the name of it, Who We Are. And we decided we would define the values that we live by. And there are only four. It's hard work, integrity, service, and stewardship. And we
Yeah.
use those today to teach and train, and everything we do is based on those four values.
Mm.
Now, of course, there are others, but those are the
Yeah.
ones we focus on.
So do you in onboarding?
We
So
use
people
yes,
get that part of the onboarding process training?
yes, absolutely. And in leadership training and in department training, everyone knows what they are and they refer to them and they build their programs on them. And so it's the strength of our company because nobody has to flounder and say, well, I'm not sure what we're doing.
Yeah, you don't want that. And I'm sure part of that training, they referred to Larry and the how it was founded, and because you want to keep those same principles. I mean, you
Absolutely.
just do. And I'm sure those four are probably aligned with yours personal one. Hard work. I know you're a hard worker, Gail.
Well, they are. And that was how our company grew during all those building years. So it
Wow.
wasn't hard to decide what they were. We struggled a little bit. And all of a sudden, when I said, why are we struggling with this? Let's look at what really happened here. And those were the words that came to mind. These are the things we did.
Yeah.
This is how we got where we are, and this is how we're going to go forward. So I think making big decisions, as you asked before, always have to be based on what you believe in, what you stand for, and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. Everything we do, we are very dedicated to continuing the legacy that we started and moving it forward. We'll increase it, we'll grow it, we'll expand our business, but we won't change who we are.
I love that. That's well said, Gail. Thank you so much. So, of course, you've been a mother, grandmother, businesswoman, entrepreneur, leader, philanthropist, and so it's probably a heavy weight sometimes that you are a role model for money. I'm sure it's good sometimes, but I'm sure it's a heavy weight. So, do you see yourself, or when did you see yourself as a role model? And I'd like, any comments about that, but also I would love to hear, like, did you throughout your life have a few role models you want to talk about?
It's a really hard question to answer. I still today have a hard time believing that people want to model their life after me because I'm just a normal person. I am nothing special. I have just lived my life according to my personal beliefs and those four values. So anybody can do that. So it's hard for me to think of myself as anything special. Having said that, when I took on this chairmanship of the company, it was recommended that I hire a coach, which I did. And
Mm.
he would have group meetings with people he was coaching. And in the first one I went to, the exercise was, okay, I want each of you to write down the qualities of people that you admire. So
Mm.
we all made our list of things we admire in other people, not necessarily one person, but any group of people, any number of people. And the things that we wrote down, we were to reflect on, and we talked about them. And then he said, those are the things that you want to be because
Mm.
you recognize them in other people and you like it well enough that that's who you want to be and you want to incorporate them into your life. That was kind of an eye opener to me.
Do
That
you remember what yours were?
well, not specifically, but I can relate to them today in the fact that the people I admire are the ones who work hard, who have integrity, who
Mm.
serve, and who look at things as a stewardship instead of an ownership. I had an interesting experience with my estate planner one day when he was talking about my owning the Utah Jazz. I said, wait, I don't own the Utah Jazz. He said, yes, you do. I'm your attorney. I can see all the ownership papers. You own the Jazz. I said, no, I'm the steward of the Utah Jazz.
Oh.
And that struck him so powerfully that he wrote a whole book on stewardship.
Oh,
And I think that's been my secret sauce. I don't need to own stuff. I just want to take care of it and make it better than when I got it.
Mm.
So that's one of those things that I admire in people. And so those are the people that are my role models. Names that come to mind are you,
Oh,
Scott Anderson,
no, of
uh,
course.
Patricia Jones,
Mm.
people who do things that make life better for others,
Mm.
make the world better, because that's what we should all be about. And every one of you has a strong set of values. You're not selfish, you're selfless.
Yeah.
The things you do because you want to share what you know and what you have and who you are. And so that's what enriches the world. I think we all need to think about doing that. And you know,
That's such a good exercise, though, to have us. And I think we need to do that, probably not just once, but every couple of years, every year, maybe. Um, Great exercise. Thank you for those comments. Someone in the chat has asked you to repeat one more time those four: hard work, integrity was second, and then they're a little fuzzy.
stewardship and service,
Perfect.
or things.
So, and I'll get a few questions coming at me, but I'm going to still go on. I had so many questions for you, so I'm going to still keep us moving, although the time is moving fairly quickly. Um, so I'm guessing that based on the research about women in leadership, which you know I do, there are times, and you maybe have inferred that when you jumped on, that you were the only women in the room or one of very few women in the room. So, what advice do you have for other women who find themselves really as the only women in the room? What advice do you have?
I've heard a lot said about this, and I think women are harder on themselves than men are on them. And when you're the only woman in the room, you have a tendency, I think women have a tendency to say, I'm less than, or I'm not as smart as. But they don't look at you that way. They look at you for your role as a woman in the whole. And you bring something special to the equation that men don't have. Women have an empathy and a compassion and a softness. And I speak a lot about love in my company. I love my people, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. And I think if you lead with love, then you will find success, because people will latch on to that. It's one of the things women can bring. But I think, to answer your question, we have to overcome the imposter syndrome.
Yep.
We have to overcome thinking that we're trying to fit into a man's world. We don't have to fit into a man's world. We have to bring the womanhood into a man's
I
world,
love that.
because they need it.
I
And we
love that.
have to overcome the fear of failure. When there are women in the room, conversation is much better. It's richer, it's fuller, it goes deeper. We just bring something that they can't comprehend. Not, and I'm not putting men down, because they do a lot of great things, but they need us. And so I think we have to overcome the fear of stepping into the spotlight, the fear that we're not good enough. We don't have to be all things to all people.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
We have to be confident in who we are. And when we speak, we have to know what we're speaking about, or we have to go research it so we can't
Yes.
speak about it, because we don't.
Yeah, and it's so much self-talk in some ways, but it's to me when you said confidence, you said that imposter syndrome. Women tend to have that more than men, and a lot of it is on the way we're socialized, honestly. So I think some of it is habits too. For instance, the research talks about women, if there's more men in the room or substantially more, we tend to just go to a seat at the back and sit down. That's habit in a lot of ways. We're just used to that. So and that's in our thinking patterns too. So you're saying just take a seat at the table and own it. Like women take less space than men. I was raised with six brothers. So So I take up a little bit more, take up some space and sit at the table. Is that what you would say, Gail?
Yes, absolutely. You have every right to be there. I mean, if you're in the room in the first place, you got there because you deserve it. You
Yeah,
didn't just walk
that's
in
true.
cold.
So other people are seeing it. Let's not continue to second guess ourselves. And I expect, Gail, that once you got the hang of that a little bit more and got through that self, then you found your voice. Then you found it's more than voice, right? It's more found your, I don't know what it is, space, voice.
For me, it took me a long time to find my personal voice. I leaned on Larry's voice for a long time because
Oh,
he was such a strong person and a strong leader. And I knew him so well that I knew what he stood for. So it took a long time for me to
did
have
you
the
lean
courage.
on that? I mean, did you just talk about him? Is that how you leaned on his voice?
I reinforced his things,
Okay.
his the things that he did. And I think I was trying to validate my knowledge of what was going on
Mm.
by saying, look, I was right there with him. I know what he would have done, instead of saying, this is what I want to do. And then there was a shift. And I'm not sure exactly when it came, but I realized that I can't do that forever. Larry's gone. In fact, one day I said to my CEO, he was talking about what Larry would do. And I said, look, Larry's dead. We're going to do it this way. And so then I started kind of inserting myself in a more,
Huh.
in a stronger way, because I think women have a common sense and some wisdom that they don't tap into very often. I think we're a little bit afraid to say, I can do this. I know what I'm talking about. And even if it's different than what's happened before, it's okay. Why not try it? If it doesn't work, so,
Yeah.
it
We're not used to being failures in some ways, and we don't like that. But the research says that the more we fail and get out there, the more confidence we get.
I think
But
that's right.
as I was just saying that, anybody that has kids, we fail a lot with kids. So maybe we should, I mean, you have to figure out how to. I just remember approaching, I thought I had the right thing to approach a kid to talk about it, and it backfires over and over again. And then you try something else. So maybe we are more prepared than we think we are.
Well, I know my mother used to say about parenting, and she had 9 children. She said, the problem with parenting is by the time you're experienced, you're unemployed. And there's no manual. So you just do
Yeah.
either what you've learned or what you think is right. And you do fail a lot, but they turn out okay most of the time.
But if we're okay with failing at least from time to time in the business or in community or in our church or anything, and then we tend to try more, do more, and then just wrestle with that. It's an interesting set of research that when we act more, we actually get more confidence instead of staying back in the background. But
There's nothing wrong with saying you made a mistake. I didn't do that right. This is how I want to change. I think that's healthy.
yeah, I like that. Thank you. So I've had a couple of comments in the chat that just say, I think there are people that know you that say you do lead with love. So just a confirmation of that as well. So let me shift for just a minute into, so you have this beautiful foundation, the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation. I love that family word in there. And you've chosen to really focus on some specific things: health, medicine, shelter and food security, education and skill development, jobs and economic self reliance, cultural and spiritual enrichment. So those are actually quite a few, but still you've narrowed in. So why did you choose to prioritize those areas specifically?
When you create a 501c3 for the purpose of a foundation, there's kind of boilerplate information. And we actually pretty much went with the boilerplate rather
Oh,
than
did you?
deciding exactly what we were going to do in the beginning. Now, as we started um, distributing our funds, we realized that those were the areas that were most requested. And
Mm.
so rather than be diluted more than that, we focus on those because that's where people need help. And we can do a lot of good in those areas. So we will deviate from those if there is a good cause, but generally we stay within those five parameters.
And do they, things are a little crazy in terms of dynamics, community, political. Do you switch with that, or do you find that if you stay in those priorities, you're serving people best? I guess.
I think you're right there. The amount in each bucket varies
Mm.
depending on what's going on in the world. But generally, those five areas cover almost every need that comes to us. And like I said, if there's something outside of one of those areas, we'll certainly give it a look.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. So I'd like to shift now. I've worked in a couple questions from the audience as we've been talking, but I want to shift to your book. So you published that in 2018. I think we've talked about a few things that are in. I remember reading your book, but it's been a few years. So again, the book is Courage to Be You. So you wrote this. I hope as you read about my journey, you will recognize a gem or two of truth that may be useful in your journey. Hopefully, you'll recognize you're not alone in a confusing and complicated world. So I really think those are beautiful, reassuring words for all of us, especially all of us as women, and actually timely, considering the isolation and loneliness that we experienced during the pandemic. So, in general, with all of that, why is it important to you that people feel alone? And then after you answer that, just any other thoughts about nuggets from your book?
Well, let me give you a little bit of a history of how the book came to
Oh,
be.
I'd love that.
I said earlier that I had a time when I had to find my voice, and it was while the company was being built and I was raising children. I said I could carry on a conversation with adults. I hated going out in public. I didn't want to be with adults because I didn't feel adequate. I didn't know what to talk about or what to say to them, or even if I was on equal footing. So as my children got older, and when they're little, they have little problems. When they get big, they have bigger problems. And one day I found myself needing to go see a psychologist with one of my children.
Mm.
I spent the day, I spent my appointment, and he said, I'm happy to help your child, but you're the one that needs help.
Oh,
I thought, wow,
oh no.
that's pretty bold. I didn't know I was having trouble. I thought I was doing a pretty good job. But I agreed to meet with him. So I met with him for a long time, many years. I had a lot of kids with a lot of
Yeah,
problems and
we all do.
a husband who was very difficult to live with. So we eventually all ended up in therapy. But when I felt I had had enough, he said to me, I think you should write a book and I will help you.
Oh,
I said, what would I write about? He says, all of the things that you've been through, because most women go through them. And they will read it knowing that you were able to come through,
mm,
and then they will feel confident that they're okay and they can do it too. So that's why it's called Inspiring Lessons from an
mm,
Unexpected Journey, because I never expected to
yeah.
be in the business world. I never expected to write a book. I never expected to be a role model. I never expected to have advice to give anyone. In fact, when I worked with him for a year, he would tell me what to write about, and all I could see were all the difficulties that I'd been through and the hard times and the things that were
Oh,
troubling to me. And I could not put
that sounds hard.
any redeeming thoughts down on paper about anything that I had done. So I put it away. I said, I can't do this. So then about a year later, my son said, Mom, I'll help you write your book. Well, actually, I even took a class on writing at the University of Utah. That didn't help either. So then my son, who is a writer, said, I'll help you write your book, but you have to promise that you will interview with me every week until we get all the information. So I promised, we did interviews, they had topics. And at the end of that year, he said, I think we should go to Deseret Book and see if they'd like to publish this. So they took the manuscript as it was, and the people at Deseret Book said, well, yeah, we'd like a book about Gail Miller, but we don't want her life story. We have Larry's. I thought, okay, that's okay, because that's
Kind
not
of a
what I'm
hit
trying
in
to
some
do.
ways.
I'm just trying to inspire women. And that's what they said they wanted.
Mm.
So it dovetailed into what they really wanted. They said, we want a little book they can put in their purse and take out, read a chapter at a time and feel something and be inspired. I said, great, we'll do that. So then they asked if I would work with a noted author. So they connected me with Jason Wright.
Oh.
And for those of you who don't know him, he wrote The Christmas Jars, and he's had
Oh.
many New York Times
Yes.
bestsellers. He lived in Virginia, and he came out and met me, and we hit it off. So I interviewed with him for another year and
Oh,
refined the chapters. We had it put chapter headings and refined what we were going to talk about. And then eventually the book was published. I don't know how successful it's been, but it served its purpose for me. And that's where those words come from. I hope as women read it, that they'll understand they aren't alone. We all go through difficult times, and it's okay. We don't have to be embarrassed by it. We don't have to feel like we're a failure, because that's life. We're all going to have difficult things that we have to do. And
I
somehow
love the,
we
oh,
manage.
yeah. I love that you had so many different drafts, because you can keep those and use them as your life history, whether they were used in the book or not, right? You had them down on paper,
Yeah.
and wow, what an opportunity for a couple years to go through so much self-reflection when you're talking to your, there were three, right? Three,
Yep. Yeah,
your
therapist
therapist, your,
and the author. And there were lots and lots of tears, I can tell you. I mean,
oh, I'm sure.
I cried through almost every interview because it was so deep and so hard and so personal. I thought, well, interestingly enough, when Larry was alive, he did some teaching at BYU to entrepreneurs, and the class would invite me to come once every semester to
Oh,
speak to the spouses about what it was like to be married to an entrepreneur.
oh,
And I said to him the first time I went, what do you want me to talk about? He said, just tell them like it is, because if you're not totally open and honest, you won't do any good.
yeah.
And so I did. And after that first 3 hour session, and we're riding home, he looked over at me, he said, really? Is that what it's like? So I learned then that being transparent is one of the most important things we can do. We have to be who we are. We
Yeah.
can't pretend we're something we're not, because people see through that. And that's the one comment I get all the time about the book is, wow, you were so honest.
Yes.
And
But there's real pressure, especially as women, and the research says in more homogeneous societies, so societies that have more of a certain race or a religion or whatever, the research tells us that there's more tendencies to compete in different ways, whether it's looks, house, whatever, and that tendency would have us hide things. But you're just at a certain point, I'm kind of there too. I just like say, whatever, whatever. This is our life. And if it helps other people, right? Like you're just talking about, it gives people hope oftentimes. And so I've had a few comments about people that have read your book and really do recommend it to other people and how it was helpful for them. So I appreciate that. So you've given the advice to, here's the quote, lead with love and success will follow. So we talked about love a little bit ago, but what did you mean? Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think it means, and I'm sure it's different for everybody who reads that, but being successful means that you are secure in yourself and
Mm,
that you have certain things that are important to you and you use those in your everyday life.
mhm.
And one for me is leading with love. I like people to be included. I like people to understand that in spite of any faults they might have or any imperfections or hardships, they're okay.
Yeah.
And if you use the love that's inside of you, people connect with that, and
Mm,
that makes you successful. So I there's a lot you could put into that
yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
It's really pretty simple. Success is where you find it. It's whatever it means to you. To me, it just means that you can tap into your truth and light. It gives us an advantage in building relationships and loyalty. It opens up our heart
Love
and
that.
it sustains us and it gives us purpose. And we can use our time and our talent and our energy to love and to contribute and serve
Mm,
in our communities and make life better for everyone. It's a lot nicer than finding fault.
true. And man, do we everything around us is finding fault right now. And
Yeah,
it's like we need to bring the noise down. And you're saying, bring that down. And then I'm going to get teary eyed and then just lean in with love.
yeah.
And that makes the noise maybe go away a little bit, at least for a while. And every time I see you, you give me a hug, and I appreciate that, Gail. So I feel it personally. So thank you so much for that. One question I didn't have on the list, but just if you have thoughts, you can think about it. But I always ask what books you would recommend. So if you have or resources or anything like that. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about that? Or I'm catching you off guard a little bit there.
Interestingly enough, because I went through therapy for so long, most of my reading list is self-help books.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I'm always looking to improve myself and learn how others have done it and be better. Uh, I also read business books.
Oh,
My coach has written a lot of books. He wrote "What Got You Here Won't Get You There,"
oh,
and that's a pretty popular book. We have to change with the times. So I don't read a lot of fiction. The girls in my family, many of them have a book club, and they read fun books every month.
oh,
I seldom get to go there, but I do sometimes read the books, and it's interesting to see what attracts them and
yeah,
where they're coming from. So I think
I
books
love
are
that.
a good way to help learn who you are.
True, true. I love that. Thank you so much. And then I've just got one comment, or I'm looking at time. Actually, where I pulled in a few from the audience, but if anybody from the audience has a few more questions, happy to work those in. But we talk about Larry and the Miller family in general has really created a legacy that's going to go on for decades. Um, and there are so many families and organizations, causes that have actually benefited from the businesses you started and operated, and you and Larry, and you're of course charitable giving. If you could choose one specific thing that would be unique to you, Gail's legacy, what would it be? That's a hard question, I know.
It's a very hard question, and it's one I'm working on because it occurred to me that my legacy is really tied up in Larry's legacy.
Yeah.
And that's okay because we have done this together. But I've lived a lot longer than he has. I've done things without him. And I think it's important in the world today for a woman who's done what I've done, and I'm not trying to take credit for anything, but someone who has gone on after their husband has been
Mm,
successful
yeah.
to have a legacy for other women to see and to be able to lean on and understand that the world is not just male oriented. And so I'm working on something, and I've explored a lot of avenues. You know, there's a business school at Salt Lake Community College
Yeah.
with my name on it. I would like to do something there, have some kind of a class. We have, I think in every university, we have some legacy, but I want it to be something that is specifically that specifically comes out of the fabric of my life.
I love that. So
And
you're
so
still wrestling
I'm
with that?
I'm still wrestling with that.
I
But
love that.
it's kind of, you know, it's coming into vision.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, we'll be excited to hear when it's clear, and that's okay sometimes. I have women all the time that say, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do down the road. I'm like, that's okay. You just step forward, you learn, you wrestle. I use that word a lot, wrestle. And then I have absolute faith that things, will open up with your good mind. If you're religious, with inspiration in various ways, it'll move forward. And I think I've talked to so many women through the years that get stuck and don't want to take that first step. I'm like, just start stepping, start doing that. I have a lovely, really important question for you from the chat, and that is this. What would it take for the Utah Jazz to become successful? I think that is I was being facetious there a little bit. But I thought that was a funny question.
Well, I guess it's how do you measure success? You know, they've
Good.
been around for a long time. I'd call that success.
That's
For them to win a championship, it's going to take a lot of money
oh,
because you have to pay those big players.
that's true.
And I know that nobody wants it any more than Ryan does. We wanted it, but Ryan's the one that's on his back now, and I know that's what he wants. I know he's working hard to get there. So,
I
fortunately
love
or unfortunately, I can say it's not my problem anymore.
I like that. I really like that. But we
So,
all hope, we all want the job. And they have had a lot of success in the year. So I do want to read one of the quotes, and then I'll ask you one more question and we'll conclude. But someone said, and I've had a few different quotes, your journey, Gail, has been so inspiring to me. You don't know me, but I have watched you step into your role, and it just made me so happy. Thank you for being a wonderful examples to all of us in Utah and beyond. Um,
that's
it
nice.
keeps moving, yeah, with the other comments. So I really love that. But one person also said that they've seen you lean in to the homeless. And why has that connected with you specifically?
There are so many people out there who are forgotten.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very humble home. There were times when we had nothing, you know, and I won't go into details, but I can remember, I'll tell one, I can remember standing on the front porch, waiting for my dad to come home with a bag of groceries so we could eat.
Ah.
So I identify with some of the things that homeless people go through. And the thing that bothers me the most about homelessness is how much they're looked down upon. They
Mm,
don't choose that life,
yep.
and they are either, I mean, many of us are one event away from being homeless, a medical emergency, a loss of a job, a child being ill, and we never know what causes it, but they deserve to have dignity. They deserve to have every opportunity that other people do. So that's the one thing
I
that
love
if I could change anything, I would change the attitude toward
it.
homeless
Mm,
people. I think if we could do that, we would change homelessness. And there are
we
a
need
lot
to.
of people working on it, a lot of people
Yes.
doing a lot of good things. And I think eventually we'll get our arms around it. and be able to do something different than has been done for a long time. And I hope so. I hope those people get a break.
Thank you.
Even the ones who are drug addicted and can't help themselves, they didn't start there.
Yeah.
That's a series of events that put them in an unfortunate situation. So I think we need to have compassion, and that's what I feel towards them. And whatever I can do, I feel it's my obligation to try to help. It
Thank
goes
you.
back to where much is given, much is
Yeah.
required.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts to share? We have a lot of people that have joined today. Others will join and listen. If you would think about, and especially there's some men on this, but a lot of women, mostly women are listening in today. What advice would you give all of us?
Well, I think the one thing that women have to understand is their value. There
Mm,
are 50% women in the world. That's not by accident. And it makes us just as valuable as the men. And unfortunately, we don't always see ourselves that way. So I think if I could give any advice, it's value yourself, overcome fear,
mm,
develop your talents, and take courage in the future. You need to be able to say, I can do this. And as everything you do starts with a thought. You can't do anything without thinking about it first. So think, I can. I can
I
do
love it.
this. I can be successful. I can do what I feel is right. I can have opportunities. So I just think women need to step up. If you
Mm,
don't step up, you're not going to go anywhere.
yeah. And we step up in other roles sometimes, but stepping up with getting engaged in the community, using our voices, all of that. Um, I just know from the research, I do so much research, that this is absolutely needed in the state of Utah to move forward. Are
Yeah.
women that say, I know enough, I am enough, and people need to listen to me to end poverty, to reduce homelessness, to, all of those issues, to make sure more people are graduating from college, all of those issues. We've just got to have more women leaning in with what you've talked about. Thank you, Gail. Thank you for so much for joining today.
Thanks
Um,
for all the good you do.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the John M. Huntsman School of Business and USU Extension, for making this event.